At the end of the 20th century, humanity was obsessed with one fundamental question: what is the universe really made of? Despite decades of scientific progress, deep mysteries still remained about the origin of matter, the fundamental forces, and the very structure of the cosmos. Solving these mysteries meant not only gaining knowledge, but also achieving technological power, international prestige, and absolute scientific leadership. During the Cold War, science and politics walked hand in hand. The United States and the Soviet Union competed not only in weapons and territory, but also in scientific breakthroughs. Even after the Cold War ended, the mindset remained: whoever led science would lead the future. It was within this context that the idea of the Superconducting Super Collider, known as the SSC, was born. It would not be just another particle accelerator. It would be the largest scientific instrument ever built by humanity. A project so ambitious that it promised to completely redefine our understanding of the universe. The proposal was bold: accelerate subatomic particles to speeds close to that of light and smash them together at unprecedented energy levels. These collisions would allow scientists to observe extremely rare particles that existed only in the first moments after the Big Bang. In other words, the SSC would be a scientific time machine, capable of recreating the conditions of the universe's birth. For the United States, the SSC represented far more than science. It was a symbol of intellectual and technological supremacy. A project meant to show the world that no other nation possessed the financial, technical, and scientific capacity to build something so monumental. The scientific community reacted with near-universal enthusiasm. Physicists, engineers, and researchers saw the SSC as a chance to answer questions that had haunted humanity for centuries. The project was described as inevitable, necessary, and the logical next step of modern science. But there was one detail few wanted to acknowledge at the time. The SSC would not only be large, it would be incredibly expensive, complex, and politically fragile. And as history would soon prove, grand dreams do not always survive the real world. To understand why the Superconducting Super Collider was so important, it is necessary to understand what scientists were truly searching for. Particle physics seeks to answer the most fundamental questions of existence. What is all matter made of? What forces hold the universe together? And why does everything exist the way it does? Since the mid-20th century, physicists had known that matter was composed of even smaller particles, such as quarks and leptons. These particles interact through fundamental forces: electromagnetic, strong nuclear, weak nuclear, and gravitational. However, the so-called standard model of physics still contained major gaps. Many particles predicted by theory had never been directly observed. This is where particle accelerators come in. These colossal machines accelerate particles to extreme speeds and smash them together head-on. The higher the collision energy, the greater the chance of creating rare and unstable particles that reveal deep secrets of nature. The SSC was designed to operate at an unprecedented energy level, 40 tera-electron volts, TeV. This was more than 3 times the energy planned for any other accelerator at the time. To achieve this, thousands of superconducting magnets would be required, cooled to temperatures near absolute zero. These magnets would keep the particles moving along a circular path inside the underground tunnel. Even the smallest error could lead to catastrophic failures. The engineering demands were extraordinarily precise, pushing technology to the very edge of what was possible in the 1980s and 1990s. One of the SSC's primary goals was to discover the Higgs boson, the particle responsible for giving mass to all others. Beyond that, the accelerator could reveal new dimensions, exotic particles, and possibly even clues about dark matter. one of the greatest mysteries of the modern universe. In short, the SSC was not just another experiment. It was seen as the gateway to a new era of physics, a leap so large that many scientists believed that once it was completed, our understanding of the universe would never be the same again. In the early 1980s, the idea of the Superconducting Super Collider moved beyond theory and began to take concrete shape within the United States government. Renowned physicists, national laboratories, and universities pushed for a project that would secure the country's global leadership in particle physics for decades. The scientific consensus was clear: without a next-generation accelerator, the United States would fall behind. In 1983, the U.S. Department of Energy officially approved the initial studies for the SSC. From that moment on, the project involved not only scientists, but also politicians, governors, and major economic interests. Hosting the world's largest particle accelerator meant billions in investment, thousands of jobs, and international prestige. Several U.S. states entered an intense competition to host the SSC. California, Illinois, Arizona, Colorado, and Texas all submitted ambitious proposals, each promising infrastructure, political support, and ideal conditions for the megaproject. Texas was ultimately selected in 1988. The decision was not purely technical, but deeply political. The state offered vast amounts of low-cost land, stable soil for deep tunneling, and, most importantly, strong political backing in Washington. At the time, Texas held significant influence in Congress and had key figures actively defending the project. The chosen location was the small city of Waxahachie, south of Dallas. A quiet, rural area surrounded by farmland, it was about to become the center of one of the most ambitious scientific projects in history. For many local residents, the SSC represented prosperity, development, and a promising future. With the site selected, the project officially entered the detailed planning phase. Engineers began designing the massive 87-kilometer underground ring. Laboratories started developing the superconducting magnets and cooling technologies required to maintain extreme temperatures. Optimism was overwhelming. Officials assured the public that the project would be completed on time and within budget. Few realized that this initial enthusiasm was about to collide with a much harsher reality, where politics, economics, and management would become nearly insurmountable obstacles. With the site selected and initial funding approved, the Superconducting Super Collider entered its most visible and ambitious phase: physical construction. The challenge was monumental. Never before had humanity attempted to excavate and equip an underground tunnel with an 87-kilometer circumference dedicated solely to high-energy science. Excavation began in the late 1980s, turning the region around Waxahachie into a massive construction zone. Drilling machines operated day and night, carving deep into the Texas soil. The main tunnel would be approximately 5 meters in diameter and positioned dozens of meters below the surface, requiring absolute precision to maintain perfect alignment across tens of kilometers. One of the greatest challenges was ensuring the tunnel's long-term structural stability. Engineers carefully analyzed soil composition, groundwater presence, and potential geological faults. Although Texas offered relatively favorable conditions, even a small miscalculation could jeopardize the entire project. At the same time, laboratories across the United States were working on the development of superconducting magnets, the true heart of the SSC. These magnets needed to be incredibly powerful yet exceptionally stable. To function properly, they had to be cooled to temperatures near 271 degrees, just a few degrees above absolute zero. Designing a cooling system capable of maintaining thousands of magnets at this temperature, over 87 kilometers, was unprecedented. Cryogenic pipelines, safety systems, and automated controls had to operate with near-perfect reliability. A single leak or failure could cause irreversible damage. In addition, the SSC required enormous electrical systems capable of supplying power to the entire complex. Power stations, control centers, and technical buildings began appearing around the tunnel, forming a true scientific city both underground and on the surface. As construction progressed, costs began to rise quietly. Each new technical challenge demanded innovative and expensive solutions. Still, at that stage, the project appeared unstoppable. To the public, the SSC was no longer just a promise. It was quite literally being carved into the ground. As the Superconducting Super Collider advanced physically, another phenomenon grew behind the scenes. The budget began to spiral out of control. What had initially been presented as an expensive yet manageable project started to turn into a financial nightmare for the United States government. At first, the estimated cost of the SSC was around $4.4 billion. This figure was already considered high, but acceptable within the context of the global scientific race. However, as technical details became more complex and construction revealed unforeseen challenges, the estimates were repeatedly revised upward. New safety requirements, technological upgrades, delivery delays, and changes to the original scope caused costs to skyrocket. Within a few years, the budget jumped to $6 billion, then $8 billion, and soon surpassed the symbolic mark of $10 billion. Each revision weakened political confidence in the project. One of the biggest issues was the lack of a clear management structure. The SSC involved multiple institutions, laboratories, private companies, and government agencies. Communication was fragmented, and critical decisions often took months to finalize. This created cascading delays that further inflated costs. In Congress, harsh criticism began to emerge. Lawmakers questioned why the project kept getting more expensive without delivering tangible scientific results. Unlike other public works, the SSC did not produce immediate visible benefits for the general population. Meanwhile, the U.S. economic landscape was shifting. The country faced growing budget deficits, and pressure mounted to cut public spending. Social programs, infrastructure, and healthcare competed directly with SSC funding. For many politicians, the particle accelerator came to symbolize a project disconnected from everyday reality. A billion-dollar scientific machine in a Texas field, consuming resources with no clear timeline for returns. Even so, supporters of the project insisted that canceling the SSC would be a historic mistake. They warned that billions had already been invested, and that abandoning the project would mean wasting everything. But by that point, the doubt had taken root. Had the SSC grown too big to be saved? By the early 1990s, the Superconducting Super Collider was no longer just a scientific project. It had become a political problem. Constant cost overruns combined with a lack of immediate results turned the SSC into a frequent target of criticism within the US Congress. The changing political landscape proved decisive. New lawmakers, less committed to the project's original vision, began questioning its true importance. To many, the SSC appeared elitist and disconnected from urgent public needs such as education, healthcare, and public safety. The end of the Cold War also fundamentally shifted national priorities. Without the Soviet Union as a direct rival, the argument for scientific supremacy lost much of its urgency. Massive investments in science no longer carried the same strategic weight they once did. Internal reports started circulating, highlighting serious management failures. Critics pointed to excessive decentralization, weak leadership, and difficulties in controlling contractors and suppliers. Each new report further eroded political confidence. International support, which could have helped share the financial burden, never materialized in a meaningful way. Unlike the later Large Hadron Collider in Europe, the SSC remained largely funded by the United States alone, making it especially vulnerable to budget cuts. Within the government itself, the project came to be seen as a political liability. Defending the SSC meant justifying billions in spending without visible returns, an increasingly difficult task in an era of fiscal restraint. By 1992, warning signs were unmistakable. Congress began gradually reducing the SSC's annual funding, delaying construction, and forcing repeated reassessments. Each delay increased costs, creating a vicious cycle that was nearly impossible to break. The project was still far from completion, but something essential had already been lost: trust. Without it, even the largest and most advanced scientific megaproject in the world was headed toward an uncertain future. In 1993, the fate of the Superconducting Super Collider was sealed. After years of debate, gradual budget cuts, and mounting political criticism, the United States Congress made the decision many feared, but few believed would truly happen: the permanent cancellation of the project. By that point, the SSC had already consumed billions of dollars. Approximately 22 kilometers of tunnels had been excavated, hundreds of buildings constructed, and thousands of workers, engineers, and scientists had devoted years of their lives to the effort. Still, none of this was enough to secure its continuation. The congressional vote was tense and deeply polarized. Supporters of the SSC argued that canceling the project at that stage would mean wasting every dollar already invested. They warned that the United States would lose its scientific leadership and that the consequences would be felt for decades. To them, moving forward was the only rational choice. On the other side, critics were equally resolute. Continuing, they argued, meant pouring even more public money into a project that seemed endless. The SSC had become the ultimate symbol of waste, mismanagement, and broken promises. When the final decision was announced, the shock was immediate. The scientific community reacted with disbelief and anger. Many physicists labeled the cancellation as one of the greatest strategic mistakes in the history of American science. In Texas, the impact was devastating. Thousands of jobs vanished almost overnight. Cities that had staked their future on the SSC were left with unfinished structures and a deeply damaged local economy. For the scientists directly involved, the cancellation was more than a professional defeat. It was an emotional blow. Years of work, research, and planning disappeared with a political signature. The Superconducting Super Collider, designed to explore the deepest mysteries of the universe, was shut down before it ever had the chance to fulfill its mission. The dream was officially dead, leaving behind an unsettling question. How could something so grand end like this? After its official cancellation in 1993, the Superconducting Super Collider entered a strange and silent chapter of its history. The site that once buzzed with thousands of workers, heavy machinery, and scientific anticipation became a largely abandoned space, marked by unfinished structures and empty tunnels. The 22 kilometers of excavated tunnels remained underground, sealed and unused. Without ongoing maintenance, many of them began to deteriorate over time. Cryogenic systems were never activated, cables never carried power, and advanced equipment was never installed. On the surface, dozens of technical and administrative buildings were left without purpose. Some were sold, others demolished, and many simply abandoned. What was meant to be the heart of modern science turned into a physical symbol of ambition, wasted by lack of political continuity. Over the years, proposals emerged to reuse the SSC's infrastructure. Some suggested transforming the site into a new research center. Others proposed using the tunnels for data storage, military testing, or even energy projects. None of these ideas ever moved forward in a meaningful way. Eventually, the site began to attract public curiosity. Journalists, documentary filmmakers, and science enthusiasts started treating the SSC as a kind of modern ruin, a subterranean monument to a future that never happened. For many scientists, visiting the former SSC site was a painful experience. Walking through empty corridors and unfinished structures served as a constant reminder of what could have been the greatest scientific revolution of the century. The contrast was stark. Cutting-edge technology, designed to unlock the secrets of the universe, reduced to concrete, steel, and silence. The SSC became a rare example of how even the most powerful nations can fail to sustain long-term projects. The ruins of the SSC represent more than a cancelled project. They are a historical warning. Great ideas require not only vision, but also continuous commitment, political stability, and rigorous planning. Without those, even the future can be abandoned before it exists. The cancellation of the Superconducting Super Collider did not affect only the United States. It triggered a global ripple effect in science. The decision left a massive void in particle physics, especially for researchers who relied on large accelerators to test fundamental theories. Without the SSC, thousands of American scientists suddenly found themselves without a central project. Many sought opportunities abroad, particularly in Europe. This shift marked a historic change. For the first time in decades, the United States was no longer the primary hub for high-energy experimental physics. In Europe, the vacuum left by the SSC was quickly recognized. CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, gained political and scientific momentum to expand its own projects. Years later, this effort culminated in the construction of the Large Hadron Collider, LHC. Although smaller than the SSC in size, the LHC was designed with a fundamentally different approach: international funding, centralized management, and cooperation among dozens of countries. Many lessons learned from the SSC's failure were directly applied to the European model. In 2012, the world witnessed the discovery of the Higgs boson at the LHC, precisely one of the SSC's main scientific goals. For many researchers, the moment was bittersweet, a monumental scientific triumph and a reminder that the discovery could have happened in the United States nearly 2 decades earlier. The cancellation also impacted the training of new scientists. For years, American students had limited access to major domestic experiments, weakening the national scientific infrastructure compared to other countries. Ironically, the failure of the SSC ended up strengthening global science as a whole. It demonstrated that 21st century scientific megaprojects must be collaborative, international, and politically sustainable. The era of purely national megaprojects was coming to an end. Thus, even though the SSC was never completed, its legacy spread worldwide. It reshaped how science is organized, funded, and executed to this day, a profound impact for a project that never became operational. The Superconducting Super Collider was never completed, never conducted a single particle collision, and never produced scientific data. Yet few projects in history have left lessons as profound as it did. The SSC became a definitive case study on the limits of human ambition when not supported by solid political and institutional planning. One of the SSC's main lessons is that large-scale science does not survive on technical brilliance alone. It depends on political stability, clear communication with society, and a management structure capable of withstanding decades of economic and governmental change. The SSC failed precisely at these critical points. The project also exposed the difficulty of justifying long-term scientific investment within political systems focused on short-term results. Fundamental discoveries do not follow election cycles. When science and politics collide, science usually loses. Another crucial mistake was isolation. By insisting on keeping the SSC primarily a national project, the United States assumed all financial and political risks alone. The later success of the LHC demonstrated that international cooperation is not weakness, but survival for scientific megaprojects. Despite everything, the SSC was not useless. Technologies developed during the project influenced advances in superconducting magnets, cryogenics, and precision engineering. More importantly, it reshaped how major scientific projects are planned worldwide. Today, the SSC is remembered not simply as a failure, but as a warning. It reminds us that even the brightest ideas can collapse if poorly managed, that progress requires patience, and that the future is not guaranteed. It must be continuously sustained. In the end, the Superconducting Super Collider fits perfectly within the spirit of Wrong Project, a monumental megaproject designed to change the world, that ultimately became an eternal lesson about the cost of failing on a massive scale.